Good afternoon. My name is Damien, the Tall Friendly Atheist Dad, host of the Tall Friendly Atheist Dad podcast. Wherever you are, whatever time of day it is, whatever you happen to be doing, I hope you're well. This is part 13 of An Atheist Reads The People of the Abyss by Jack London. Now, normally I'd have the music playing right now. Victim of Illusion. That's but all I can say for now is head on over to victimofillusion.bandcamp.com, pick up their album Invisible Light for a very reasonable price. So yeah, this is obviously part 13. I'll be reading chapter 14, Hops and Hoppers. So, yeah, if you haven't yet, go over some of the previous episodes. This book is actually quite an interesting book. It really gives a picture of life in Victorian era London, and yeah, it's interesting how far that we've come. But anyway, the background video for this reading will be unedited footage, 20th of the 12th, 2021, Geelong to Melbourne by the Illuminati, and I'm going to give him a like, or them a like, because you don't know what. So let me just get that lined up in the screen. There we go. Geelong to Melbourne is is a road I've travelled down hundreds of times. So I'll be looking at stuff, but here we go. So chapter 14, Hops and Hoppers, and we'll start with 3, 2, 1.
Elongated masquerade.
Okay, there we go. So that's him talking there. Okay, chapter 14. So far has the divorcement of the worker from the soil proceeded that the farming districts, the civilized world over, are dependent upon the cities for the gathering of the harvests. Then it is, when the land is spilling its ripe wealth to waste, that the street folk, who have been driven away from the soil, are called back to it again. But in England they return not as prodigals, but as outcasts still, as vagrants and pariahs, to be doubted and flouted by their country brethren, to sleep in jails or casual wards, or under the hedges, and to live the Lord knows how. It is estimated that Kent alone requires 80,000 of the street people to pick her hops. And out they come, obedient to the call, which is the call of their bellies and of the lingering dregs of adventure lust still in them. Slums, stews, and ghetto pour them forth, and the festering contents of slum, stews, and ghetto are undiminished. Yet they overrun the country like an army of ghouls, and the country does not want them. They are out of place, as they drag their squat, misshapen bodies along the highways and byways. They resemble some vile spawn from underground. Their very presence, the fact of their existence, is an outrage to the fresh, bright sun and the green and growing things. The clean, upstanding trees cry shame upon them, and their withered crookedness and their rottenness is a slimy desecration of the sweetness and purity of nature. Is the picture overdrawn? It all depends. For one who sees and thinks life in terms of shares and coupons, it is certainly overdrawn. But for one who sees and thinks life in terms of manhood and womanhood, it cannot be overdrawn. Such hordes of beastly wretchedness and inarticulate misery are no compensation for a millionaire brewer who lives in a West End palace, sates himself with the sensuous delights of London's golden theatres, hobnobs with lordlings and princelings, and is knighted by the king. Wins his spurs, God forbid. In old time, the great blonde beasts rode in the battle's van and won their spurs by cleaving men from pate to chine. And, after all, it is finer to kill a strong man with a clean slicing blow of singing steel than to make a beast of him, and of his seed through the generations, by the artful and spidery manipulation of industry and politics. But to return to the hops, here the divorcement from the soil is as apparent as in every other agricultural line in England. While the manufacture of beer steadily increases, the growth of hops steadily decreases. In 1835, the acreage under hops was 71,327. Today, it stands at 48,024, a decrease of 3,103 from the acreage of last year. All right, give me a sec. There it is. Yes, yep, I recognise where we are. I've been down this road, gajillions of times. So I'm drinking my coffee as well, but yes, this is... Yeah, Northern Geelong isn't the classy, isn't classy. I wouldn't quite say they're people of the abyss, but... It is, but yeah, it is very working class. South Geelong is more of your, I suppose inner South Geelong is your more classier Geelong. And then, you then have, the very working, because you had the Ford factory in Geelong for quite a while. The Ford factory is now who was it? There's a military company that hey, we are recording, so if you're gonna, you can talk if you want. Actually, I might get you to record something with me later on. I've got something for you. Yeah, I'll just describe later on. All right, can you shut the door on your way out? Thank you. All right, I better give my opinion on the book. 3, 2, 1. All right, where is it? Let me hit the mute on that. And where is... Come on. There we go. Let's not hit that too loud. All right, yes. So, it's now getting agricultural workers to work on, farmers are needing people to get people to work on the farms. It is, So I think what I've picked up from this first couple of chapters is that, yes, so the people who used to work on the land have been forced off it for whatever reason. He doesn't quite go into the reasons yet. But then when they come back to work the seasonal jobs, they're treated as outcasts. They're treated as pariah, and they're vagrants. And so when they go to back to London, they're treated like crap. And then when they go work work in the farms that the agricultural people need, they need people to pick the because this would have been so this is early 1900s. This is before this would have been before widespread machinery. Let's say some machinery, but not lots. And then yes, it is estimated that Kent alone requires 80,000 people to pick her hops, obedient to the call. So I suppose it's a little bit like if I can imagine something like The Walking Dead. people like zombified people just walking down the highway to. Another. Jeez. I'm reading a book about a very anti-capitalist book while drinking my Starbucks and recording on an Apple computer. I'm such a hypocrite. Oh boy, it's fun. But then this paragraph down here. Such halls of beastly wretchedness and inarticulate misery are no conversation for a millionaire brewer who lives in a West End palace, sates himself with sensuous delights of London's golden theatres, hobnobs with princelings and lordlings. And then where he says, in old time, the great blonde beast rode in the battle's van and won their spurs by cleaving men. So what he's saying is back in the old days, you earned your awards from the king for actually, killing people, like going into battle and risking your life. But now in this day and age, you get the king's spurs by, being a rich billionaire. So of course, yes. So yeah, it's interesting. So this book does take a very anti-capitalist view, which, I'm not entirely, I don't entirely agree with, but I'm not entirely opposed either. So let's just get that out of the way. I'm all for people making a reasonable profit and making a living wage, but just not at the expense of exploitation, if you get what I mean. So yeah, and so we can, and the picture it paints here as well is that, so you do have this constant theme of rich people manipulating, living life, and then not giving two hoots about the about the people who actually do the work and the poor people and all that kind of stuff, and it's Anyway, I'll get back to the book in 3, 2, 1. Such as the acreage is this year, a poor summer and terrible storms reduce the yield. This misfortune is divided between the people who own hops and the people who pick hops. The owners perforce must put up with less of the nicer things of life, the pickers with less grub, of which in the best of times they never get enough. For weary weeks, headlines like the following have appeared in the London papers. Tramps plentiful, but the hops are few and not ready yet. There have been numberless paragraphs like this. From the neighbourhood of the hop fields comes news of a distressing nature. The bright outburst of the last 2 days has sent many hundreds of hoppers into Kent, who will have to wait till the fields are ready for them. At Dover, the number of vagrants in the workhouses treble the number there last year at this time, and in other towns the lateness of the season is responsible for a large increase in the number of casuals. To cap their wretchedness, when at last the picking had begun, hops and hoppers were well nigh swept away by a frightful storm of wind, rain and hail. The hops were stripped clean from the poles and pounded into the earth, while the hoppers, seeking shelter from the stinging hail, were close to drowning in their huts and camps on the low-lying ground. Their condition after the storm was pitiable, their state of vagrancy more pronounced than ever. For poor crop that it was, its destruction had taken away the chance of earning a few pennies, and nothing remained for thousands of them but to pad the hoof back to London. "We ain't crossin' Tweepers," they said, turning away from the ground, carpeted ankle deep with hops. Those that remained grumbled savagely among the half-stripped poles at the 7 bushels for a shilling, a rate paid in good seasons when the hops are in prime condition. and a rate likewise paid in bad seasons by the growers because they cannot afford more. Actually, I'll go another paragraph. I passed through Teston and eastern Westphalia shortly after the storm, and listened to the grumbling of the hoppers and saw the hops rotting on the ground. At the hothouses of Barham Court, 30,000 panes of glass had been broken by the hail, while peaches, plums, pears, apples, rhubarb, cabbages, mangolds, everything had been pounded to pieces and torn to shreds. All of which was too bad for the owners, certainly. But at the worst, not one of them, for one meal, would have to go short of food or drink. Yet it was to them that the newspapers devoted columns of sympathy, their pecuniary losses being detailed at harrowing length. Mr. Herbert L. calculates his loss at £8,000. Mr. F. of brewery fame, who rents all the land in this parish, loses £10,000. And Mr. L., the Wateringbury brewer, brother to Mr. Herbert L., is another heavy loser. As for the hoppers, they did not count. Yet I venture to assert that the several almost square meals lost by underfed William Buggles and underfed Mrs. Buggles and the underfed Buggles kiddies was a greater tragedy than the £10,000 lost by Mr. F. And in addition, underfed William Buggles' tragedy might be multiplied by thousands where Mr. F's could not be multiplied by 5. Alright. Yeah, so I think it's good how we have come a long way from that, in that we now pay a lot more attention to the human misery and the human cost of floods and all that. And I'm thankful for the union movement. The union movement has, even if you're a dyed-in-the-wool conservative, you have to be thankful that the union movements, especially those of old, were risking sometimes their lives to stand up for, a decent wage and safe conditions and all that kind of stuff. You need people to stand up for the lesser, the people who can't stand up for themselves. And I'm glad that's what, unions and charities and all that kind of stuff do. And look, I'm all for, highlighting the financial losses. Yes, but it is also interesting that the mass media reporting doesn't show the, more of the, well, at this time anyway, doesn't show the more human costs of, the people who, the people who will go without, food or drink. People with children who, so the Buggles is just it's like Smith now. Yeah, it's just a name that you put in there to put a name in. So yeah, it is a bit of a I suppose tragedy is the best word for it, but also, and look, if you think this guy did the wrong thing by pretending to be homeless in order to get the story out, then it's I suppose this is the ethics of undercover journalism, and I suppose journalism in general is that how far are you allowed? How far should you go? How far are you allowed to go? What? It's just. This says I drink my Starbucks. on my Apple device. There, back to the book. 3, 2, 1. To see how William Buggles and his kind fared, I donned my seafaring togs and started out to get a job. With me was a young East London cobbler, Bert, who had yielded to the lure of adventure and joined me for the trip. Acting on my advice, he had brought his worst rags, and we hiked up the London road out of Maidstone, for he was worryingly greatly for fear we had come too ill-dressed for the business. Nor was he to be blamed. When we stopped in a tavern, the publican eyed us gingerly, nor did his demeanour brighten till we showed him the colour of our cash. The natives along the coast were all dubious, and bean feasters from London, dashing past in coaches, cheered and jeered and shouted insulting things after us. But before we were done with the Maidstone district, my friend found that we were well clad, if not better than the average hopper. Some of the bunches of rags we chanced upon were marvellous. "The tide is out," called a gypsy-looking woman to her mates as we came upon a long row of bins into which the pickers were stripping the hops. "Do you twig?" Bert whispered. "She's on to you." I twigged, and it must be confessed the figure was an apt one. When the tide is out, boats are left on the beach and do not sail, and a sailor, when the tide is out, does not sail either. My seafaring togs and my presence in the hop field proclaimed that I was a seaman without a ship, a man on the beach, and very like a craft at low water. "Can you give us a job, governor?" Bert asked the bailiff, a kindly-faced and elderly man who was very busy. His "no" was decisively uttered, but Bert clung on and followed him about, and I followed after pretty well all over the field. Whether our persistency struck the bailiff as anxiety to work, or whether he was affected by our hard-luck appearance and tale, neither Bert nor I succeeded in making out. But in the end, he softened his heart and found us the one unoccupied bin in the place, a bin deserted by 2 other men, from what I could learn, because of inability to make living wages. "No bad conduct, mind ye," warned the bailiff, as he left us at work in the midst of the women. It was Saturday afternoon, and we knew quitting time would come early. So we applied ourselves earnestly to the task, desiring to learn if we could at least make our salt. It was simple work, woman's work, in fact, and not man's. We sat on the edge of the bin, between the standing hops, while the pole puller supplied us with great fragrant branches. In an hour's time, we became as expert as it is possible to become. As soon as the fingers become accustomed to automatically differentiate between hops and leaves, and to strip half a dozen blossoms at a time, there was no more to learn. We worked nimbly, and as fast as the women themselves, though their bins filled more rapidly because of their swarming children, each of which picked with 2 hands almost as fast as we picked. "Don't you pick too clean, it's against the rules," one of the women informed us, and we took the tip and were grateful. As the afternoon wore along, we realised that living wages could not be made by men. Women could pick as much as men, and children could do almost as well as women, so it was impossible for a man to compete with a woman and half a dozen children, for it is the woman and the half a dozen children who count as a unit, and their combined capacity determines the unit's pay. "I say, matey, I'm beastly hungry," said I to Bert. We'd not had any dinner. "Blimey, but I could eat the hops," he replied. Whereupon we both lamented our negligence in not rearing up a numerous progeny to help us in this day of need. And in such fashion we whiled away the time and talked for the edification of our neighbours. we quite won the sympathy of the pole puller, a young country yokel who now and again emptied a few picked blossoms into our bin, it being part of his business to gather up the stray clusters torn off in the process of pulling. Alright, I'll go for a few more minutes. With him, we discussed how much we could sub, and were informed that while we were being paid $1 for 7 bushels, we could only sub, or have advanced to us, $1 for every 12 bushels, which is to say that the pay for 5 out of every 12 bushels was withheld, a method of the grower to hold the hopper to his work, whether the crop runs good or bad, and especially if it runs bad. After all, it was pleasant sitting there in the bright sunshine, the golden pollen showering from our hands, the pungent aromatic odour of the hops biting our nostrils. And while remembering dimly the sounding cities whence these people came, poor street people, poor gutter folk, even they grow earth hungry and yearn vaguely for the soil from which they've been driven, and for the free life in the open, and the wind and rain and sun all undefiled by city smirches. As the sea calls to the sailor, so calls the land to them, and deep down in their aborted and decaying carcasses, they are stirred strangely by the peasant memories of their forebears who lived before cities were. And in incomprehensible ways they are made glad by the earth smells and sights and sound which their blood has not forgotten, though unremembered by them. Okay, so it is interesting in that, yeah, you had, so the family, literally a family job. Now, it doesn't sound too, I have to say, it doesn't sound too pleasant. It doesn't sound like too pleasant work. And yeah, I'd rather the kids be in education and, but this is, I'm glad for stories like this that, we know and we can tell and we have an idea of what happened in the past to, I suppose, help us appreciate how good life is at the moment. How relatively easy it is. It's just, it is, now how long left? Oh, okay, actually, not much more left in this chapter, so I'll finish this chapter off then. But yeah, it's tough work. It is, it's got to be done. It's, the machinery isn't quite there, and there's also, it seems to be like this, I want to say caste system, but there's a system of, there's this kind of understanding between everyone that, it's just a fascinating. I hope you're getting a fascinating picture. Anyway, back to the book in 3, 2, 1. No more ops, matey, Bert complained. It was 5 o'clock, and the pole pullers had knocked off, so that everything could be cleaned up, there being no work on Sunday. For an hour, we were forced idly to wait the coming of the measurers, our feet tingling with the frost from which came on the heels of the setting sun. In the adjoining bin, 2 women and half a dozen children had picked 9 bushels. So that the 5 bushels the measurers found in our bin demonstrated that we had done equally well, for the half dozen children had ranged from 9 to 14 years of age. 5 bushels! We worked it out to 8p halfpenny, or 17 cents, for 2 men working 3 hours and a half. 4p farthing a piece, a little over a penny an hour. But we were allowed only to sub 5p of the total sum, though the tally keeper, short of change, gave us a sixpence. Entreaty was in vain. A hard luck story could not move him. He proclaimed loudly that we had received a penny more than our due, and went his way. Granting, for the sake of the argument, that we were what we represented ourselves to be, namely poor men and broke, then here was our position. Night was coming on. We had had no supper, much less dinner, and we possessed sixpence between us. I was hungry enough to eat 3 sixpence worth of food, and so was Bert. One thing was patent. By doing 16.3% justice to our stomachs, we could expand the sixpence and our stomachs would still be gnawing under 83.3% in justice. Being broke again, we could sleep under a bridge, which is not so bad, though the cold would sap an undue portion of what we had eaten. Though the morrow was Sunday, on which we could do no work, though our silly stomachs would not knock off on that account. Here then was the problem. How to get 3 meals on Sunday and 2 on Monday, for we could not make another sub until Monday evening. We knew that the casual wards were overcrowded. Also, that if we begged from farmer or villager, there was a large likelihood of our going to jail for 14 days. What was to be done? We looked at each other in despair. Not a bit of it. We joyfully thanked God that we were not as other men, especially hoppers, and went down the road to Maidstone, jingling in our pockets the half-crowns and florins we had brought from London. Okay. Well, there we go. So they did 3.5 hours of work for a handful of pennies. Let me just put my bookmark in this. And where's my bookmark? Bookmark right there. Beautiful. So I'm actually about halfway, according to this PDF I've got of the book, I'm about halfway through. So, but yeah, it is just interesting how so they will withhold your wages because they can. Because of course they can. What kind of, it wouldn't be a capitalist system if they couldn't, it's so, hey, you got a penny more than you were supposed to. Stop complaining. Man, I'm really glad that we live in these times. Wow, what a story. So anyway, next chapter will be chapter 15, The Sea Wife. Now there was one thing I was also going to briefly mention as well, and I forgot what it was, where it was. Man, sorry to make this broadcast boring. All 4 of you who listen, 3 of them me. Oh boy. So yeah, look, if I remember it, I'll remember it later on. Yeah, great. But anyway, I'm going to end the broadcast the recording here. My name is Damien, the Tall Friendly Atheist Dad. Check out my online endeavors, anchor.fm/TFA Dad, twitter.com/TFAD pod, and www.tallfriendlyatheistdad.com. Until next time, look after yourselves, stay safe, and yeah, just look after yourselves. We all need it.